Now, we're kind of a Marvel family here at the Phillips household. The kids are into Marvel. We're into Marvel. I loved watching all the Marvel movies. But the thing about the Marvel movies is they're all pretty much the same. I mean, when you think about it, they all boil down to pretty much the same premise. I mean, everything is falling apart. The world is breaking apart. There's some huge problem. And there is a bad guy that is causing all of this. And throughout the movie, you wait on the hero to come in. And usually, what happens in these Marvel movies is the challenge is too great in the beginning, and the hero tries but doesn't quite find that he or she is able to succeed. And so then they have to find a new way, a new power, a new understanding, a new insight. They find the weakness to the bad guy, and then boom, the hero comes in and rescues and saves the day. That is pretty much how all the Marvel movies work, right? I know there was a couple that kind of surprised us and they kind of ended on a down note, but you know what? Those were just part one, and by the time we get to part two, everything is made better again. I mean, that's kind of the basic premise, and that's kind of the basic premise because that's how we like it. I mean, think about it. We like hero stories. We love it when a hero swoops in and makes everything better. And the Bible, in a way, is kind of full of hero stories. I mean, if you look through Scripture, you're going to find men and women who played this role of hero, who came in and made a huge difference and changed the world or changed the way in which people saw things. And yes, they were the heroes of the story. But as we read the Bible, you and I know that it is not about the particular hero, right? It's always about the God who is behind the hero. And that's what makes hero stories in the Bible so much different than the hero stories that we see on our televisions or at the movies. You see, when it comes to a hero, it's always the God behind the hero. The problem is, just like us watching those movies, sometimes the participants in the story forget that it is the God behind the hero. Take, for example, the story of Moses. I mean, this is a great story. Moses comes in and he goes into Egypt, and he confronts the Pharaoh, and he gets the people free from the Pharaoh. They go out into the wilderness. And yes, I know there are all kinds of problems that come up. But really, at the beginning of this, Moses is the hero. He's the man. And throughout this story, it is almost as if God and many times Moses is trying to point beyond himself to the God who is behind everything that's happening. And unfortunately, the people don't always see it. In Exodus chapter 17, there is one of these moments where it shows a couple different places where Moses can easily be the one who's seen as the hero. The first one is right at the beginning of Exodus chapter 17. It talks about how the Israelites had journeyed to a spot, and when they go to encamp there, it's a great place to camp. The problem is there's nothing to drink. And so the people begin to complain to Moses, and Moses then in turn complains to God. And then God tells Moses, take some of the elders, take them to this place that I'm going to show you, and you're going to take the staff that's in your hand, the one that you had that helped you turn the Nile into blood when you were trying to set the people free. Take that staff, and when you hit this rock, water will flow from the rock. And that's what happens. And what most of the people see is Moses going up and hitting that rock, and when it does, water comes from it. What they don't see is this part where God says in verse 5, go on ahead of the people, take some of the elders and the staff, and I will be standing in front of you on the rock of Horeb. You see, God is standing in front of Moses. And there's no indication that the people that are there see God standing. What they see instead is Moses. And they attribute what has just happened to Moses. And Moses continues throughout the story to try to point them to the God that's behind all that he does. The next story that's there is a time where they have to go and they have to fight an enemy that lived in the region, Amalek. And when they have to fight them, what they do is Moses calls Joshua and he tells Joshua to find some men and they're going to go down, they're going to fight this battle. And he tells Joshua that he is going to be standing on the mountainside. And as he does, he's going to hold up his staff. And when he holds up his staff, it causes everyone to rally. And the Israelites, the Hebrews, begin to win. But every time Moses lowers his hand, the Israelites begin to lose. And so Moses has to continue to hold his hands up. And when his arms get so tired he can't hold them up, he calls two other assistants aside, and they come and they hold his arms up so that he can hold that staff up in the air. Again, the people see this, and I can't help but think what they're thinking is it's Moses that's bringing this victory. When in reality, what Moses is holding up is a symbol of the power of God. A symbol that they miss, that they don't see. You know, the fact is we as humans all have limitations. The heroes that we see in the Marvel stories, they all have limitations. And in the Marvel stories, what happens is they find a way within themselves, usually, to overcome their limitations. But in Scripture, what helps those heroes overcome their limitations is the God who is behind that. As well as, in that other story, even in some ways, the community that comes up beside Moses and holds his arms up. When we look at our world, we may look at it like the beginning of a Marvel movie. I mean, things are broken, there's bad guys all around, and we may sit around and find ourselves waiting for a hero to emerge. But in reality, it doesn't matter which person emerges, how we necessarily respond, but it is how God empowers us, empowers those men and women of faith to do the great work of faith. It doesn't just come from within. It comes from the God who helps us overcome our limitations. Great hero stories. But the true hero of all Scripture is the God who is behind us.